There are a lot of contradictions in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. Books contradict games, games contradict other games, books contradict other books, and so on. But nothing comes close to how screwed up this one children's activity workbook is. Almost nothing in this whole book makes any sense with the story, even though it's very clearly tied to the story. Even the most problematic Fright stories fit more cleanly into the games than this thing. Why? I'm glad you asked, assuming you did, because I'm gonna go through it bit by bit to show you just how frustrating it is. So, first things first, what even is the Logbook? It's said to be an in-universe book given to employees of Fazbear Entertainment. But is this actually true? That depends who you ask. Some say that yes, this is an actual book from the time of FNAF 1. Others say that no, it's actually a book made by the team at Fazbear's Fright to sell in their merch shop. Personally, I believe the former, but it doesn't matter because each option has just as many problems. Let's start with the idea that it's really from FNAF 1. Mike wrote in it, and then it was recycled for another employee, so it would make sense, right? Well, let's flip through the book and see if this holds up. Okay, all good, all good. There are FNAF 2 characters, which is a little weird, but I guess Fazbear Entertainment doesn't care if employees recognize them or not. But other than that, it's looking pretty solid. Wait, what was that? Page 26, the start of Night 2. The Fazbear's Fright office is shown, which didn't exist until 30 years after FNAF 1. Okay, that's strange. But maybe the artist used the wrong reference image and Scott didn't catch it. Let's keep going. Good. Uh-oh. On page 34, we see a drawing of casual bongos. This is a very clear reference to Night 3 of Sister Location, which has to happen after FNAF 1 in order for the fun times to have the remnant from the animatronics, and for Didophobia to happen. And this isn't just something an artist would have screwed up, this is an actual bit of lore from Mike himself. Okay, so there are two problems, but I can overlook that. I mean, look at this. We got FNAF 4 lore that also makes no sense. On page 41, which is still the Night 2 section, Mike draws Nightmare Fredbear. The problem with that is that you can hear the Night 1 phone call throughout all of FNAF 4, and Mike didn't see Nightmare Fredbear until Night 5 of that game. That would mean that in order for Mike to draw Nightmare Fredbear on Night 2 of FNAF 1, he would have needed to hear the first call several days before he started his job. But that's only a matter of a few days, I can forgive that. This next one, though, is a massive problem. Page 50 has direct quotes from the FNAF 3 training tapes, recorded in 1985 at the latest. These tapes talk about Springlock suits and the safe room, both of which the company had been covering up for a decade by the time of FNAF 1. There's a sticky note saying to disregard the page, sure, but the only way the page could make it into the book in the first place is if it was printed in 1985 or earlier. But the book is filled with drawings of the toy animatronics, which were built in 1987. And you can't even excuse it as them planning these animatronics years beforehand, because Mangle is here too, and they weren't a planned character. They were only deemed the Mangle retroactively because kids kept tearing them apart.
The staff literally had to put Foxy back together at the end of every shift. Eventually they just stopped trying and left him as some kind of take apart, put back together attraction. Now it's just a mess of parts. I think the employees refer to him as just the Mangle.
Then, on page 84, there's an entire activity about the safe room, which, like I mentioned before, was covered up by this point. The page also implies Mike knows about the room, since he draws the ghosts next to it. So that makes it weird that he didn't check there when he was looking for clues as to where his father went. But maybe he just thought that would be a dumb place to look. Regardless, this page still makes no sense. And then finally, on page 90, Mike references something from Sister Location a second time, meaning that the first time couldn't have been just a fluke. So, that's 5 major timeline errors and 1 minor one from a short activity book. But what if it's actually from Fazbear's Fright, like the other fans believe? Putting aside the various descriptions that go against that idea, it still makes no sense looking solely at the book itself. Let's flip back to page 1 and do this all over again. Our first issue is actually right on the very first page this time. Why does it have Mike's name crossed out if it's not being given to someone who works after him? This theory hinges on it being a gift shop item. Did they, have him fill it out and then sell copies of his writing on it? Why? Nobody would understand the references that he makes throughout the book. Next, on page 6, Mike implies that he can eat by saying that he took the job due to employees getting free pizza. The thing is, by the time of FNAF 3, he kinda has no stomach. Eating pizza isn't exactly an activity for the stomachless. Then, on page 10, there are direct quotes from the FNAF 1 calls. The team at Fazbear's Fright only had the FNAF 3 training tapes, so they wouldn't have all this information, much less exact quotations. Next is the thing that I find the most important. The book references the tapes that were found just 5 days before the attraction burned down, twice. And one of them has a whole maze attached. They wouldn't have had nearly enough time to add these pages and print the book for the gift shop if they were still working on it by night 2. That's only 5 days before the grand opening. Now, I have 3 more points, but I'm not going to go in page order because they're all over the place. 1. Why would Cassidy be present in the first place? Golden Freddy isn't at Fazbear's Fright, they're in Molten Freddy. 2. The book has 2 references to the FNAF 2 calls, which Fazbear's Fright also wouldn't have. One of the rules says, don't admit any prior employees, referencing how Ralph said,
From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees.
The second is actually a direct quote from him.
The characters have been acting very unusual, almost aggressive toward the staff.
And finally, there are references to many characters who weren't at Fazbear's Fright, those being Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Bonnet, Biddy Bab, Minorina, and Fredbear. It's not like they couldn't have gotten parts from these characters if they wanted to, they just didn't want to. Even the toy animatronic parts were shoved into the office, completely unused. It's clear that Fazbear's Fright only wants to replicate the FNAF 1 location specifically. Oh yeah, and one other thing. The idea of Fazbear's Fright having a gift shop in the first place didn't exist until years later, when What We Found came out. So, yeah, we can avoid the 6 problems of the first option, but only by creating 8 problems with the second option. Fun. So, what do we do now? Personally, I just ignore everything outside of the Cassidy and Crying Child dialogue. After all, if Scott didn't care how it fits into the lore, why should I? For those of you who clicked on this video thinking it would talk about the codes, I hate the tally marks. I can dismiss the Foxy grid as a terrible hint toward the word search, but what am I supposed to do with 39 tally marks? What are there 39 of? 39 days? 39 years? 39 issues with the book's canonicity? I'm inclined to believe that last option.